dozens of medical school rejections over 10 years to getting accepted on a full ride scholarship. If you're thinking about medical school, more specifically, if you're thinking it's not in the cards for you, you'll want to stick around for this story because it didn't seem like it was in the cards for me either. Here's the story. I started medical school at age 40, but I first applied at age 30. In between that time, I took the MCAT 4 times. I applied to and finished graduate school. I applied to over 120 medical schools and experienced the pain of rejection, even being waitlisted at some of my favorite programs before I was finally accepted. For those 10 years, I literally ate, breathed, and slept the medical school admissions process. This whole journey started back in 2006, and at that time, I was in training to become an acupuncturist at Chinese medicine school. And during this time, our training consisted of roughly 1/4 of just straight Western medicine. And we had Western MDs come in and teach us things like lab interpretation or physical exam skills. And throughout this process, I started to realize that what they were doing was different from the rest of what I was learning. Up until this point, I can tell you that becoming a doctor was as far from my radar screen as could be. Doctors were simply the people that you visited once a year for a checkup, and that was it. I had no concept of the possibility of actually becoming a doctor myself. Once I finally started working with Western trained MDs, I realized that their way of thinking, their way of approaching disease was exactly what I wanted to do. Now, initially, I thought, okay, I need to quit what I'm doing. I need to change course, try to get into medical school. But that didn't quite sit right. I didn't want to quit a program that I had been accepted into, so I decided to stick with it. I worked for the next 3 years to finish my Chinese medicine training, all the while doing volunteer experience and starting to explore the process of applying to medical school. In 2009, I finally graduated from Chinese medicine school. I became licensed as an acupuncturist, but the minute I graduated, I started taking post-bac classes. I went to a local community college and I started backfilling all of the courses: physics, chemistry, biology. The ironic thing is that I studied all of these things in college. I took courses like physics, biology, chemistry, but I had no direction when I was in college. I had no idea why I was taking these classes. I just thought you were supposed to. As a result, I did quite poorly in these courses. I even failed some of them. So when I got done with Chinese medicine school training and I realized that I needed to have grades from these courses, I went back to the community college and started to backfill. After a year of doing post-bac work, taking a Kaplan course to get ready for the MCAT, I was finally ready to start the process. The first thing I needed to do was sit for the MCAT. My MCAT journey was a long one, and the first time I took the MCAT was nearly a disaster. I woke up the morning of, I had done all of my preparation, I took my Kaplan course, I was ready to go. Woke up early, had a good breakfast, so I take off, driving on my way, and about 15 minutes into the drive, I come up to gridlock traffic. And I'm not talking slow traffic, I'm talking the kind where the cars are all shut off and people are walking around. And I thought, this can't be happening. So I waited for a bit to see if things would clear up. It didn't. I looked at my traffic app and realized it was solid red on both sides of the freeway, and I freaked out. So I called the head office down in Washington, D.C. I said, I'm on my way to the testing center. I am stuck. There's no way I'm going to be able to get there on time. And the central office called the testing office and they said, okay, if you can be there a half hour late, you can sit for the exam. So long story short, what ended up happening was a semi truck delivering beer had crashed and spilled its contents across both of the sides of the highway and completely blocked the highway. And they were able to clear enough to start to let traffic trickle through. And I drove probably faster than I needed to get to the MCAT center. And when I finally sat down at that desk about 30 minutes late, I was a frazzled mess. So you can imagine it took me a while to settle down. The resulting score from that day, slightly below average. It wasn't very good. Over the next 2 years, from 2010 through 2013, involved 3 rounds of applying to medical school, 3 rounds of taking the MCAT, and roughly about 120 to 125 rejections from medical schools. Now, I always tell people a rejection from medical school stings a lot worse than you might think. You pour so much of yourself into a medical school application, between your personal statement, your application to your secondary application, and then in return, you receive a letter saying no. And what it feels like is that they've seen your entire soul and they've said, we don't like you, we don't want you. Now, I will say that as you get more and more rejections, it starts to get a little bit easier to take, but trust me, every rejection stings, and it's really hard to build momentum back up and keep going. Now this takes us to 2013. My last rejection letter came through. That was it for my third cycle. I was not getting into medical school that year, and I will tell you that I got angry. I threw away some of my materials. I said, that's it. Medical school is not in the cards for me. I'm done. And I sat in that space for a few months, but as we all know, those of us who really, really want to go into medicine, that feeling is not going to go away. So after a few months of settling down and thinking about it, I realized I still wanted to do it. Now, this was literally my turning point in this whole journey. And what this involved was me stopping what I was doing and taking a really close look at myself and why I was not being admitted to medical school. Now, I'll tell you, I got really close to getting into medical school a few times. I was waitlisted. I almost got in. But the truth was, I wasn't ready to get into medical school. When I looked at all the feedback from my interviewers, the most common feedback that I got was that I was lacking research experience. So I took a minute and I looked at myself and I looked at all of my experience. I had decent scores, decent grades. I had a pretty good understanding of human biology and scientific underpinnings of going into medical school. I even had extensive clinical experience. The thing I didn't have was research experience, and that was crucial. So in 2013, I went back to graduate school for a second time. I enrolled in a Master of Science in Biology program. I ended up doing really interesting work with transgenic zebrafish and gene models involved in certain blood cancers, namely chronic myeloid leukemia. And this experience basically transformed me. Throughout those years, I became a much more prepared applicant for medical school. Now, when I got out of graduate school, I was not still certain that I was going to be applying to medical school. I was applying to research jobs. I still had it in the back of my head that medicine just wasn't for me. I wasn't going to be able to get in, or I was too old. By this point, I had met my fiance. I was starting to think about other aspects of my life. But one day, while I was sitting with my now wife, at the time we had just started dating, we were eating ice cream at a local ice cream shop, and I was terrified to tell her that I was thinking about medical school. Because to me, saying you want to go to medical school, saying you want to be a doctor, that's potentially a deal breaker for someone. And so I was terrified when I told her, finally, I'm thinking about going back and applying to medical school. And you know what she said? Do it. From that day forward, my wife became my absolute champion. She helped me to get the motivation, to feel confident, to go back and apply to medical school. Now, this brings us to 2018. I have fully re-engaged with the medical school admissions process. I have retaken the MCAT and got better scores. I have gotten entirely new letters of recommendation. I have completely recrafted my application. I was a new medical school applicant, and I applied just as broadly as I had before, but now it was different. Now I was getting more interviews, more interest, and things felt different. This brings us to the day that I was accepted to medical school, a day I will never forget. On that day, I was actually teaching a biology course at a local community college, and I was just finishing one section of the lecture, which was going to be followed by a short video, when I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I didn't think much of it. I finished my section, put on this short video, and went to the back of the class to wait for it to finish playing. I picked up my phone and glanced down, and there was a voice message from a number I didn't recognize, but from an area code that I did recognize. And it was the area code from one of my favorite medical school programs. I picked it up, I opened it, no voicemail. I waited and I waited and I waited and I waited, no voicemail. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this can't be. What did I do? I Googled the number. The number came up as a number from the medical school that I had in mind. It has to be them. It has to be them. Why would they be calling me? Finally, I finished my class, went back to my office, called my wife. I said, we got a number, we got a call from this school, it has to be them, it has to be them, but no voicemail. I can't tell, it took about 25 minutes for the voicemail to come through, but finally it did. And I was standing in my office and I got that voicemail, and I will tell you, there are few days in my life when I have literally jumped for joy, and I jumped for joy in that moment. This brings us to the spring after being accepted to medical school. This is a wonderful time. This is when you know you've gotten in. Now you're just planning. Maybe you need to move. Maybe you need to start onboarding with your program. And a letter came through from the program that I had been accepted to, and it said scholarship opportunity. It was a scholarship opportunity for students that were interested in pursuing a career in cancer. And I had done my graduate work in cancer. And I thought, this is interesting. And specifically, it was a scholarship that was funded by a former physician at the program that I was accepted to, who was a hematologist oncologist and worked with childhood leukemia. I wrote my letter and submitted my application. And about a month and a half later, I got an email from the program saying, congratulations, you have been awarded a full tuition scholarship to our program. I can't even tell you what that day meant. That day erased all the hardship that I had experienced the 10 years prior to that. Not only had I been accepted to medical school, I had been accepted on a full tuition scholarship. This was something that I never expected was possible. And that brings us to the present day. I am 3 years into my residency in diagnostic radiology. I could not be happier with my choice to go into medicine, my choice of specialty. And many times I've looked back over all those years and all that hardship and wondered, what if I had gotten in sooner? In fact, I had an interaction with one of my attendings while I was in medical school. And after talking with him, I realized that he went to one of the medical schools that I was waitlisted at. And then I realized that he went to the medical school during the same years that I would have gone, which would have meant he would have been one of my classmates. And then I realized that my attending was where I would have been if I'd have been accepted that year. I would have already been an attending. And I spent the next couple hours thinking about that, thinking, oh my gosh, I could have already been done with my training. But the truth is, I was not ready back then. And I would have never gone through my medical training with the support that I had. So I would never change it. I would never change what I went through to get to where I am now. I tell you this story not to brag, not to boast. Really, honestly, I tell you this story to inspire you. Because getting into medical school, while it is incredibly difficult, is not impossible. You do not have to be a genius. You do not have to have top-tier scores. You just need to have direction. You need to have purpose, and you need to have grit. You need to be able to persevere through many, many failures, because I will tell you, I endured so many failures and so many setbacks in the process to getting into medical school. If you're willing to do that, if you're willing to push through and fail and deal with hardship, you will get into medical school and you will become a doctor. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope that this was inspiring. I hope that this is helpful. If you've gone through similar things, put a comment down below. Let me hear what you went through. Let other people hear what you went through. Share your successes, share your failures. Tell us how hard it was to get to where you are now. These are the things that help people, that motivate people. That's why I'm putting this video up. Thank you for listening. It's been fun.